things done that they see need to be done. We are working on our main focus, which are jobs and the economy. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow's good-paying jobs will come from the freedom to innovate from the bottom up with organic growth, not from top-down bureaucracies in Washington, D.C., looking out for themselves and attempting always to control the American people. Mr. Speaker, we have passed many bills, as I've said before. One is the Small Business Regulatory Flexibility Improvements Act, H.R. 527, which was approved by the House by a vote of 260 to 163 in February of this year. That's a bipartisan vote, Mr. Speaker. We passed the Unfunded Mandates Information and Transparency Act, H.R. 50, by a bipartisan vote of 250 to 173. We passed the Death Tax Repeal Act, H.R. 1105, by a vote of 240 to 179. This is often called, it's called the death tax. It's sometimes called the estate tax. But it hits, Mr. Speaker, not just wealthy people, but average people with huge unfair taxes. This bill would provide certainty for families and allow small businesses to focus on growing new jobs, and is the smart thing to do for our economy. Mr. Speaker, much of the economic turmoil that's gripped this nation is the result of the federal government spending beyond its means. In North Carolina, I hear often from constituents who are worried about our ballooning national debt, which threatens economic stability and jeopardizes the American dream for our families. Irresponsible spending isn't fair to our kids who must repay the debt, and it's not good for the economy. Unknown to many Americans, the House Republican majority has cut federal spending 2 years in a row for the first time since the Korean War. We banned earmarks and achieved the most significant spending reductions in modern history, and we protected tax cuts for 99% of individuals and families. We passed a balanced budget conference agreement, which balances the budget within 10 years without raising taxes and achieves more than $5 trillion in savings. It's the first joint 10-year balanced budget resolution since 2001. We passed the Student Success Act, which replaces No Child Left Behind by reducing the federal footprint in education, restoring local control, and empowering parents and education leaders to hold schools accountable for effectively teaching students. It stops the federal government from coercing states into adopting Common Core. We expanded and strengthened 529 college savings plans by a vote of 401 to 20, a very strong bipartisan vote. We have passed in energy policy the Keystone XL Pipeline Approval Act, the Natural Gas Pipeline Permitting Reform Act. We passed the LNG Permitting Certainty and Transparency Act. We passed Improving Coal Combustion Residuals Regulation Act of 2015. Mr. Speaker, we are working on the economy, on bringing down the cost of energy, on providing for national security. We've passed the National Defense Authorization Act, H.R. 1735, and are in conference now with the Senate on this bill. We passed the National Cybersecurity Protection Advancement Act, again, by a very large bipartisan vote, 355 to 63. We passed Protecting Cyber Networks Act by a large bipartisan vote of 307 to 116. And we passed a bill signed into law by the President in June, the USA Freedom Act, which ends the bulk collection of data at the National Security Agency, prevents government overreach, strengthens protections for American civil liberties, and increases the transparency of certain national security authorities. As my colleague from Arkansas talked about previous to my coming on the floor, we have passed several bills to honor our veterans. They have earned our respect, and they shouldn't have to wait in line for months or years to see a doctor. When our brave service members come home, we have to keep our word to them by modernizing our VA system to deliver the best care in the world, and we have kept our promises to our veterans. And Mr. Speaker, we have focused also on the human side of what needs to be done in our society. We passed the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act. It was signed into law on May 29, 2015. Human trafficking is a major problem in our country, and we're doing all that we can to diminish it and eliminate it. Mr. Speaker, we passed the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act,